IELTS is one of the most popular exams out there. If you're looking to work, study, or immigrate to an English-speaking country, chances are you have already heard of IELTS. So in this episode, I want to give you a general overview of this exam and also give you some useful tips in case you are about to take it or thinking about taking it. Hey everybody, how's it going? Thiago here, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. In case you're listening to me for the first time, I've created this podcast and YouTube channel to help intermediate and advanced learners of English communicate with more confidence, more accuracy, more clarity, and more awareness. If this sounds like something you want for yourself and your English, subscribe to the channel here on YouTube and follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else where you listen to podcasts. All right, so let's talk about IELTS a little bit today. IELTS stands for International English Language Testing System. Some popular countries that accept IELTS include Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and the United Kingdom. So if you're thinking of studying in these countries, working there, or even immigrating, IELTS is a popular test to take. Governments, employers, and educational institutions use it to test an applicant's level of English, and it is an exam that is jointly owned by the British Council, IDP IELTS, and Cambridge University Press and Assessment. There are two types of tests, the academic test and the general English test, and you are tested in 4 different areas: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So it's a real complete test. So you can have a very good assessment of what your current level is. In both versions of the test, academic and general, the speaking and listening papers are the same. So in case you're wondering what's the difference between the academic IELTS and the general IELTS, the reading and the writing are the main differences here. The speaking and the listening papers are the same, so the reading will be different, so will be the writing. Okay? So now let's talk a little bit about the speaking portion of IELTS. A little overview of what you can expect on the speaking paper. So the test usually ranges from 11 to 14 minutes. It's not a very long test. It's a face-to-face interview between you, the test taker, and the examiner. The test is recorded, and it's divided into 3 parts. In part 1, you need to answer a range of questions on everyday topics. You know, things like your family, your hobbies, where you went to school, your plans for the future, questions of that nature. Then in part 2, you are supposed to give a 2-minute monologue about a topic. You receive a card and you are given, if I'm not mistaken, a minute to prepare your answer. And then you are supposed to mention all those points, those bullet points in your card in 2 minutes by yourself. You have to give a 2-minute monologue. Finally, in part 3, you are supposed to answer a range of questions on more abstract topics related to part 2. So the difference between parts 1 and 3 is that in part 1, the questions will be more personal. Like I said, family, hobbies, work, studies. And in part 3, the questions will be a little bit more abstract based on the topic you covered in part 2. So I don't know, maybe what is your opinion on education? Do you believe that remote work will remain as popular as it is nowadays? Or will it cease to exist in the future? You know, these are more abstract topics. So you have to have an opinion formulated around them and be able to articulate this opinion. Okay? Now, let me give you some useful tips for the speaking portion of IELTS. Give complete answers. It's not a good idea for you to just give a 1-word answer. For example, where are you from? Brazil. No, give a complete answer. Oh, I come from Brazil, or I am from Brazil. All right? Avoid 1-word answers. Still on that line, be concise, yes, but not too short. So you want to give a complete answer, You want to be concise. You don't want to speak for too long on that question, but you don't want to be too short either. It's a fine line. If you are able to provide the answer in full, and then maybe support that with one or two extra supporting details, that's fine. Just as an example, think about the question, where are you from? Or where do you come from? An example or model of answer could be this. Well, I come from Brazil. I was born and raised there, and I have lived there all my life. You see, I am giving a full answer and adding one or two extra pieces of detail. So that's what you want to do, okay? It's a combination of being concise, but not being too short at the same time. You should practice speaking for 2 minutes on a topic because in part 2 of the speaking test, you are supposed to give a 2-minute monologue. Remember, it's just you by yourself for 2 minutes talking about that topic on the card you received. So in preparation, pick a random topic and time yourself on the phone. Give yourself 2 minutes to talk about that topic. When you start doing this, you will realize that while 2 minutes might seem like a short time, when you are actually speaking by yourself for 2 minutes, it can feel like a long time, and it's not so simple. All right? So make sure you practice speaking on various topics for 2 minutes so you can get a feeling or a feel of what 2 minutes feels like, when you are talking for that amount of time. Also, you have to use a range of vocabulary. Try to vary the words you use. If you can remember maybe a more advanced word or expression, use it. Don't obsess over it, but it's nice for you to sprinkle, one or two more advanced expressions or words if you can remember them. Okay? And of course, for you to do well on the speaking test on IELTS, you need to practice, practice, practice. I chose to talk about the speaking part first because I believe it is the hardest skill to practice because you either practice it by yourself or you have to find someone to practice speaking with. Thankfully, nowadays we have wonderful technology available to help us with that. And that's why I want to introduce you to today's sponsor, IELTS Speak. IELTS Speak is a really cool app that shows your mistakes in English pronunciation and speaking by using advanced artificial intelligence technology. It gives you a score on your pronunciation, fluency, and intonation, and you get precise feedback instantly to each and every single sound. You also get to learn a lot of vocabulary, phrases, and sentences for daily communication. One of the things I love about IELTS Speak is that it has more than 1,000 lessons and more than 40 topics for you to practice your speaking skills with AI. And here's the cool thing. There are complete IELTS preparation courses powered by AI inside IELTS Speak. Let me show you how they work. All right, so I have my IELTS Speak app here open, and this is the homepage. If you want to access the IELTS courses, you come here to earn a certificate at the bottom. And check this out, guys. You see, we have all these courses available, and not only on IELTS, we have TOEFL, TOEIC, Oxford. Really cool, right? But we are talking about IELTS today, so let's focus on IELTS. Here I have Band 6, 7, and 9. Let's go to Band 7. 7 is usually a good enough score for most people because it's already an advanced level on IELTS. So notice that there are 90 lessons only for Band 7. So let's open that up. And here you have the units and the topics. All these are topics that you will likely encounter when you take IELTS, okay? You see, there's a lot of them. But let's focus on the first one here, work and education. And I want to show you lesson 2 because it's kind of a conversation. Look, why did you choose that job? This is a typical question that you might be asked when you take IELTS speaking. So check it out.
Are you working or studying now?
You see how cool? So it asks me a question and it gives me an answer. Notice that I have up there regular and advanced. I'm using regular here because I just want to focus on some specific sounds. If you choose advanced, it's going to point out everything that maybe you have to work on, okay? So here, notice that the CH for teacher is highlighted. So I have to make sure I pronounce this sound correctly, this ch for teacher. So check it out. I'm working as a teacher. I graduated from college a couple years ago, and I've taught in an elementary school since then. You see? So I got this sound right. Let's continue.
Why did you choose that job?
Okay, notice here that now I have to focus on do for education, okay? Well, I got interested in it during my first year of college. I was tutoring high school students, and I realized how much I loved teaching. After that, I decided to major in education.
Do you think you'll continue working in this field or change careers at some point?
Now I have to focus on careers, okay? Let me try to mispronounce it just so that you can see what's going to happen here. I definitely want to continue teaching for now. I don't know how I'll feel in the future, but right now I can't imagine changing careers. Got it? I mispronounced my target word, careers. It's careers, right? So you'll see here, try again. Pronounce double E for career, all right? So let me try that again now. I definitely want to continue teaching for now. I don't know how I'll feel in the future, but right now, I can't imagine changing careers. Nice.
Is there anything you wish you could change about your job?
It's a challenging job, but I like it. The salary is the only issue. Teachers aren't paid enough in my country, and I definitely wish I could change that. Nice. Okay, and there you go. The lesson is done. This was a speaking activity that we just did, but if I come back here, look. I have here 96% accuracy in this lesson. That's really cool. But look, if you come back, lesson 2 was a conversation lesson, but lesson 1 is a collocations lesson. So you'll learn these collocations like work as, challenging job. And then lesson 3 is collocations with work that you learn. And then notice that the purple icon there is the conversation practice. You see, this is really, really cool, guys. And it's a great way for you to practice for IELTS speaking using AI. Really cool, right? And all the IELTS courses are available if you sign up for the premium plan of IELTS Speak. I spoke to the folks at IELTS Speak and they gave me a special link to share with you. This link will give you 50% off the premium membership for 1 year. So you can access the premium features, including all these IELTS courses here with 50% discount for the first year. The link is here in the description of the video, also as a pinned comment below. And if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, just go to the show notes and you can find the link there. You can also just try the app for 7 days for free if you prefer. Then there's another link for that also in the show notes and in the description of the video. But this is a great deal, and if I were you, I would take advantage of it. 50% off, 1 year premium membership, and then you have access to not only all these IELTS courses, but a bunch of other cool features to take your English to the next level. Now, let's talk a little bit about the listening portion of IELTS. So, the listening test takes 30 minutes to complete, all right? Actually, it's 30 minutes plus 10 minutes for you to transfer your answers at the end to the official answer sheet. So the test itself will be 30 minutes, but then you will have 10 minutes at the end to transfer your answers from the paper test to the answer sheet. All right. The listening test on IELTS is divided into 4 parts, 10 questions each. And in parts 1 and 2, the topics will be usually around social everyday situations. Parts 3 and 4, however, will be more about educational and training situations. I would also add that in terms of level of difficulty, as you progress in the listening test, the parts get harder. They tend to get harder. So part 1 tends to be easier to complete, easier to understand. And then as you move on to parts 2, 3, and 4, the level of difficulty tends to increase. By the time we got to part 4 tends to be the most challenging part. Okay? Also, remember that on IELTS, you only hear the recordings once, meaning you have just one chance to get the answer right. Okay? This is one main difference between IELTS and other tests. For example, I took the Cambridge exams, and in the Cambridge exams, the good thing about them is that you get to listen to the passage twice, but also the passages are quite challenging to complete, even listening twice. IELTS, on the other hand, I would say that the level of difficulty is not as high as Cambridge, but you only listen once. Okay? And also, when it comes to the listening, be prepared to listen to a range of different accents. So you're going to hear British accent, Australian accent, people from New Zealand speaking, and of course, North American accent. So this is a little bit different from TOEFL, for example. TOEFL, since it's an American test, the listening portion will be mainly American speaking there. Now, IELTS, on the other hand, you're going to have a range of accents to listen to. Okay? Now, let me give you some useful tips for the listening part. Review the alphabet and the numbers. What, Thiago? The alphabet and the numbers? But these are so basic topics. Yes, exactly. They are basic topics, but in my experience, I have seen even more advanced learners of English struggling with the alphabet and the numbers. Why am I telling you to review the alphabet, the ABC letters, and also the numbers? Because especially in part 1, but between part 1 and 2, I would say, some of the answers will be names of places. And like names of cities, names of museums, and they usually spell these names out in the passage, like CAD, BC, whatever, So make sure you practice spelling the words and you review the letters on the alphabet, because remember, you only listen once. So you have to be able to understand the spelling once and get the word right. Otherwise, you miss the point. And also numbers. You might hear passport numbers. You might hear phone numbers, and depending on the speaker, you might hear things like 555-1248. Okay, 555, that's 555. Okay, or 0047, that's 0047. So it seems like a very basic, easy topic, A, B, C, D, E, the alphabet and the numbers. But guys, for IELTS listening, you really want to review those, okay? Trust me on this. Also, make sure you read the instructions carefully. Some of the instructions on the listening passage include things like no more than 2 words and or a number. So some exercises give you the word limit you have to, include your answer there. So read carefully the instructions. Maybe the exercise is asking you to write 2 words and then you write 3. You're going to miss a point. You're going to miss a mark. So you don't want to miss points for inattention, In my opinion, that's a ridiculous way of missing points. Another tip, listen to descriptions of places. I say this because there is an exercise on IELTS. Not every time you take it, but when you take it, you might have to do this kind of exercise on the listening paper where you have a map in front of you and you are listening to a passage of a person describing that place on the map. So you have to be able to listen and identify on the map where that person is or which section of the map or the place the person is talking about. And then you follow the order. So make sure you practice by listening to descriptions of places. Descriptions in general. Maybe you can open a YouTube channel about traveling, those traveling agencies that have YouTube channels and they make those videos, those promotional videos about many cities in the world. Listen to videos like that where, there's a speaker describing places. Also, maybe you can listen to things like National Geographic or Discovery Channel, those documentaries where a person goes to explore a place in the world and talk about it. So these documentaries, even series, they describe places, so make sure you are also familiar with this kind of English, English used to describe places. All right. I would also say that for you to do well on IELTS listening, you have to increase your processing speed. Because, maybe you have very good listening skills already, but when you take IELTS, you don't just listen. You got to listen and write at the same time. So you are doing two things at the same time. You're not just listening. And remember, you only listen once. So you got to be able to listen, let's say, fast enough and write fast enough so you don't get lost and you keep following the passage and writing down the answers. So some ways for you to practice your processing speed, like improving your processing speed before sitting the IELTS exam, could be practice listening to something while taking notes at the same time. Okay? For example, you can listen to my podcast now and grab a piece of paper or a notebook, and as you listen to me, take notes of what I'm saying and try to keep up with what I'm saying as you take notes. And then you listen to another podcast on a different topic and just listen to it. Don't watch it, okay? Just listen to it, and as you listen, take notes of what the speakers are saying and try to keep your focus on the notes you're taking and also on the listening passage. It's kind of challenging, but with practice, you develop this processing speed of listening and writing at the same time and not being lost. Okay, this is really, really important. And of course, practice listening for gist versus listening for specific information. The gist is the main information there from the passage. All right. Sometimes you're going to have to understand the main message. Sometimes you're going to have to listen to specific information. Like I said, names of places, maybe the time the airplane departs, very specific information like that. So practice doing both. Okay. Maybe you can listen to a podcast and then you can take notes of the general idea of that podcast, like what the general message is. But then you can listen to the same podcast and focus on maybe getting specific things, like maybe some names that are mentioned in the podcast, maybe some colors, maybe some numbers, some measurements, so try to get specific information as well. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about the reading paper. Well, the reading paper on IELTS lasts for 60 minutes. So you have 1 hour to complete it, including the transfer time. So you got to be able to answer all the questions and transfer your answers to the answer sheet within 60 minutes. Okay. It's not like the listening test where you are allowed to have 10 minutes extra at the end to transfer your answers. Okay. The reading is divided into 3 parts and it has a total of 40 questions. Now, this is one of the differences between the academic test on IELTS and the general test. The difference here is that if you take IELTS Academic, the reading paper, the texts you're going to have to read are more academic oriented. Of course, they are more oriented to academia. All right. Now, if you take the general test, you're going to read stuff like newspaper articles or magazine articles, bulletin boards, announcements, stickers, that kind of thing. Okay. It's more the kinds of texts, let's say, that we see in day-to-day life. Okay. So the academic IELTS actually has academic influenced articles there for you to read. Okay. And the general IELTS has day-to-day texts that you are likely to encounter when you live in an English-speaking country. Okay. Some tips for the reading paper. I'm talking about like in preparation for the test. Okay. Before, like months before you take IELTS, read broadly. Read broadly, read extensively. Okay. Read all kinds of things because decoding words in a text is not the same as understanding a text. You might be able to decode all the words there when you read, but can you actually understand what the text is about, what that paragraph is about, what point the writer is making there? Okay, so it's important that you improve your level of literacy in English, all right? Because people, like I said, may be able to read the words in a document, but not really grasp the arguments, the analogies that are used in that document. The same thing applies to writing, okay? Students may be able to write or type sentences, but they cannot express complete, cohesive thoughts in their writing. So by increasing your level of literacy, you increase your chances of doing the reading and the writing paper on IELTS extremely well. But this preparation needs to come way before you take the exam, okay? So make sure you read a lot and you write a lot. I'm going to talk about writing soon, but I can already advance that. This is really important, okay? Also, learn the difference between skim reading, scan reading, and extensive reading, okay? Extensive reading is what we call reading for pleasure. You know, reading for pleasure. You are reading because you want to, you know. You engage in extensive reading when you read your favorite novel, for example. Maybe you love the Harry Potter series and you read them in bed before sleeping. This is extensive reading. This is reading for pleasure, okay? Now, when you take a test like IELTS, you are not reading for pleasure, right? You are reading because you have to read, because you have to answer those questions and get them right so you can get the score that you need, right? So in that case, it's much more useful for you to employ the skim reading and the scan reading techniques, okay? Skim reading is about not reading the whole text, word for word, not reading every comma, every period, okay? It's just reading enough so that you can understand the main idea of the text. This is skim reading, okay? Now, scan reading is about scanning the text, looking for specific information within the text. Once you find that specific information, you stop reading and then you answer the question. So when you take IELTS, you want to have a combination of skimming and scanning, okay? For example, a very useful way for you to skim read a text, I find, is you read the first paragraph, the last paragraph, and just the first sentence of the paragraphs in between. Let me say that again. You read the first paragraph, read the last paragraph, and then the paragraphs in the middle, you just read the first lines. This is a very nice way for you to skim read a text. You're not going to read everything, but doing this will already give you a pretty good idea of what the text is about. Okay? Then you can go to the questions, and then you can read the questions and identify keywords within the questions. And then you're going to look for those keywords in the text. And then you start scanning the text, for those keywords. You are looking for those keywords for that key piece of information from the question. Once you find that, then you read that portion of the text to make sure you found the answer to answer the question. You see, so that's kind of how the mental process goes when you take the reading test on IELTS or any proficiency exam for that matter. That's pretty much the technique here. So for IELTS reading, you want to employ skim reading, scan reading, and also a little bit of prediction. Like you can read the topic of the text, you can read the title, and you can already predict what the text will be about. Okay? Finally, talking about the writing portion, the writing also takes 60 minutes to complete, and you have to write 2 tasks. Task 1 and task 2, okay? This is also a difference between IELTS Academic and IELTS General. So if you take the academic IELTS, task 1 will be about reporting data or summarizing data from a graph. They're going to give you a graph or a pie chart or some statistics, some line graphs. You have to interpret those numbers there, and then you have to write a summary of that data. You have to select the most important information from that data and report that in a very objective way. Okay? Now, if you take the general IELTS, you're not going to have that task to do as task 1. You're going to have a letter to write. And they're going to give you a topic, a letter, and also the person you are writing to. So, you might have to write a letter to a friend. You might have to write a letter complaining about something or a letter applying for a job. So you have to pay attention here to who you are writing, because that will dictate the tone that you adopt, in your text. Okay? Are you going to have to write in a more formal way, semi-formal way, or can you be casual? Okay? Now, task 2 is the same for both IELTS Academic and IELTS General. You have to write an essay. Okay? They give you a topic, and then you have to write a discursive essay, an argumentative essay about that topic, sharing your opinion. Okay? So let me give you some writing tips here. First, it's crucial that you learn the difference between formal and informal English for writing. We also call them the registers. So learn formal register versus informal register. And depending on the test you take, you can be more semi-formal. A semi-formal writing style is formal by nature, but, with some casual features. All right. So learn the difference between formal and informal registers. Okay. Learn cohesive devices, conjunctions, linking words like on one hand, on the other hand, moreover, additionally, furthermore, due to, owing to, those linking words, they are very useful for the writing part. Also, make sure you divide your text when you write an introduction, body, and conclusion. You can divide it into 3 steps: introduction, body, conclusion. About your body paragraphs, remember that you should have one central point per body paragraph. So each paragraph should be about 1 point only. If you want to talk about something else, start a new paragraph. How do you usually structure a paragraph? Well, you usually start with a topic sentence that contains the main point of that paragraph, the central point, and then you add supporting details. These are the examples you're going to use to support that topic sentence, or the arguments you're going to use to support that topic sentence. Okay? Also, make sure you follow the process of outlining your text, drafting it, and editing it. Okay? You should follow these 3 steps. What is the outlining process? Well, it's the initial process. It's what you do first. You just outline your essay or your letter or your report. Like, okay, I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to talk about that, this, and that. You see, you have like the bullet points, the main pieces of meat, let's say, that you're going to include in your composition. This is outlining it. So I really recommend you spend the first 5 or even 10 minutes just outlining your piece of text. Then you go to the drafting part. Yeah. The drafting is when you actually write it. You write it, you write all of it. But then you also have to have some time available at the end to edit your draft. You're going to quickly come back to your draft and start making some corrections there. Okay. So make sure you practice doing all of that within the time. The time is also maybe your greatest enemy when you take IELTS, for example, because you have 60 minutes to complete 2 pieces of writing. Yeah. Task 1, you can dedicate 20 minutes for that. And task 2, the essay, which is longer, you can dedicate 40 minutes for that. So when you are writing task 1, for example, this is the shorter task. So just dedicate 20 minutes for that. Dedicate 5 minutes to outline your text, and then 10 minutes to write it. That's already 15 minutes. And then the final 5 minutes to edit your work. The same thing for the essay. Devote at least 40 minutes for the essay, because you have to write more words and it's more complex in terms of what you have to talk about, right? So again, 5 minutes to outline it. Maybe you can write for 20 or 25 minutes, and then you leave at least 5 minutes at the end to edit your work. Okay? Before taking IELTS, months before, you should be practicing writing. Okay? So develop a daily writing habit. Maybe you can start writing on a journal, or you can start writing a blog, but get into the habit of writing, of sharing your thoughts, your opinions, or ideas on writing or in writing. Okay? You can use a website like Write and Improve from Cambridge. This is a really useful website for that. And you can also get a teacher to review your written work and give you feedback. This is when having a teacher can be useful. Yeah, you can write some essays, some letters, some reports, send them to your teacher, and your teacher will grade you and give you feedback on your composition. And that's all I have for today's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed this general overview of IELTS and also these tips. I hope you find them useful. Keep in mind that even though I was talking specifically about IELTS here, these tips can be applied to any proficiency test you take in the future. TOEFL, Cambridge, any, okay? Because the mechanics here are pretty much the same among them, with a few key differences. But these tests tend to be very similar in how they operate, okay? Also, don't forget to check out IELTS Speak. This is a great app. There is a special link now with 50% discount on the premium membership for 1 year. And if you sign up for the premium membership, you can unlock the entire IELTS package they have there to help you in your preparation. So the link is here in the description of the video. There's also another link you can use to just download the app and try it for free if you prefer. But this is a great deal that you don't want to miss. 50% off 1 year of the premium membership, and you can unlock all the IELTS package, the certificate packages they have. All right? Guys, I'm Thiago. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be talking to you very soon in the upcoming video. Bye-bye.